from a Brahminic mind, right? This notion that if a Brahmin body dances, and it then can only be about bhakti. How can any dance form not be about the physical body? I mean, it's a visual form. It's going to be about the body. It's nobody, I think, can exclude their own sexuality from their own body when they present their body on a stage.
Lights, Camera, Azadi is a show that is on a quest to meet personalities. The personalities who have always challenged the status quo. These people are courageous and confident to speak the truth and are best at it. Though the world may or may not agree with them, they always work for nation building. We want to talk to them and understand their perspective. We want to know their worldview, their thoughts, and what gaps do they see in the society, and most importantly, how to live life fearlessly. My name is Vandit Jain, and I am just a medium to get these stories to you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 43rd episode of Lights Camera Azadi. Hope you all are well. This is a very special episode, and also an episode which will forever remain close to my heart. Nrithya Pillai is a dancer, dance composer, singer, writer, speaker, and dance instructor who proudly claims her heredity dancer lineage. This is the first time I've got an artist from the dance fraternity. Nitya's story is special, not because that she practices Bharatanatyam, but because she fiercely challenges the status quo that comes with Bharatanatyam and is reclaiming that space which once belonged to her ancestors. It is an episode where the theme of the show truly illuminates. Nitya is the perfect example of a person silently challenging the oppressive norms of her society, and while she is at it, she is also doing something for her community. This episode will give you a peek in Nitya's life, her journey, and the history of Bharatanatyam. So I hope you all enjoy the episode. And before we move forward and meet Nitya, please hit the follow button on Spotify, subscribe us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and ping me on Clubhouse. Yay! So without wasting any time, let us go and meet Nitya. For quite some time, I have been thinking of putting my thoughts on paper and share them with you regularly. So I'm thrilled to announce my bi monthly newsletter, Hypothesis. Hypothesis is a newsletter that is the show's extension, a commentary on society and culture as I see it. Here, I want to talk about my observation of the world around me, how I see people to people interaction, families, social structure, a bit of politics, and essentially my hypothesis of why things are. If you would like to subscribe, go to lightscameraazadi.in/newsletter. You will find the link in the show description. I repeat, lightscameraazadi.in/newsletter. Thank you.
Hi all. Lights Camera Azadi is a year old now. While I do this effort part time and after office hours and on weekends, the truth is I haven't made any money out of it. If you think what I do is worth it, it adds value in your existing knowledge base, and you want me to continue doing this, I request you to please support me for an episode that you like. You can go to patreon.com/azadi and make any contribution, big or small, of your choice. To just make a one-time contribution, cancel the charges after you have paid. Your small contribution can go a long way in my endeavor to bring stories to you.
So 3, 2, 1. Nrithya Pillai, welcome to Lights Camera Azadi.
Hello, Vandit. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Nrithya, the pleasure is all mine, and you are a very inspiring figure, and many of my listeners admire you a lot. And I must tell you that many listeners have recommended me back to back that I should get you on the show. So I'm so damn excited that you finally made it.
I am surprised to hear that. I mean, it's been, I've just been hearing about the kind of waves that my work is creating, and I'm surprised by it because I never thought that. I mean, I was always aiming at making the dance fraternity or the so-called classical dance fraternity turn around and listen to me, but looks like there's this whole other world that is hearing what I am saying, and it's just making me feel extremely happy. And I feel like, this discourse needs to get outside whatever we call the dance fraternity is. So I'm glad that that is happening, and I'm also thankful to those people who follow me and who make me feel heard, because I think for any marginalized person who's speaking a very unique kind of narrative, or a certain from a very different kind of background, which is not the regular kind of anti-caste narrative. So I think it's very important to feel heard, and it's only in recent times that I feel heard, and I feel great about it. It makes me feel like my work is meaningful, and at some point in time, change is inevitable. Yeah.
Nrithya, that's thank you for saying all of this, and let's begin from that time. How did you got introduced to the movement, and what has been your journey like? Like, where does it begins, and what has been your journey of self discovery and being where you are right now? Can you walk us through that?
I should say that I was born in a family that had caste endogamous marriages, and we, um, despite our perhaps, this is the caste that probably drove the Dravidian movement in Tamil Nadu. A lot of leaders are from this community. Men are from this community, but despite which we I mean, quite against the anti-caste narratives of wanting to find occupation that is outside of your a stipulated varna. I think inevitably we were people who were following the same occupation that was assigned to us historically. In the sense that at least the men were teaching dance, but obviously the equations had changed with time. So my grandfather was a very well known, what they call Nattuvanar, was or a
Yes.
male hereditary practitioner who was teaching a lot of dancers, most of whom are now celebrated dancers, who are acknowledged and celebrated women, mostly, who perhaps reign what we call the classical form of Bharathanatyam. But obviously, the women in the family in the last 5 generations have been kept off of this art form. With the criminalization of the women practitioners. So somehow I belong to a family that was holding on to a profession that was historically given to them through the caste system. But I also felt that it was wrong that we could not choose to be dancers. Our choice of wanting to dance, or to choose dance, was denied to us. So our access to this art form was denied as women. um, and I figured this problem as a very young person, because we had this kind of a bias right at home when my parents would say, "You can." You please don't think of making this a profession. This is not meant for us. This is not something that you can aspire to do. We are not them. So while I constantly saw all these beautiful, slim, fair, quintessentially beautiful upper caste women learning from my grandfather, with their parents being extremely supportive, I realized that that world was not mine, and I could never belong there, and I would never be accepted there. So my quest was basically for that equality that I wanted, where I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be allowed to compete or be part of that world. So I think, like everybody's quest for equality begins with very small things. Sometimes it's about the food that male members are given, and you are denied on the dining table. That makes you wonder why it's so. Why you're not treated equally. I think this was my breaking point, and I started thinking about equality. through this lens. But slowly, I think I would say that I was somebody who uh, essentially did not believe in bigotry, even as a young person. So I didn't believe in caste. I didn't believe in, I didn't believe in oppression. I didn't believe in being somebody who is superior because of belonging to a certain caste location or a class location. So I inherently, that was not taught to us back at home, but I did feel othered. So I felt that my caste location was causing me a lot of trouble, and the self persecution was very severe back at home. This whole notion of my own mother would say things like, it's what can we do, we are born in this community, or it's a terrible plight that we have to go through, that we are from this kind of a courtesan caste. While it was not said loudly, but I could feel the repercussions, and for a long time I didn't understand what it was all about. So I started digging up, and slowly I figured out that this whole story of how immoral women were dancing an art form, and then it had to be cleansed by upper caste people to make it palatable and to make it pure. And I realized that the story was more nuanced than that. And I realized that my I belonged to a disenfranchised community, which had been marginalized and had been used in order to appropriate an art form, which has been reinvented, and it is now called Bharatanatyam. So while this happened, as a marginalized person, I also feel that I am connected to every other marginalized person, be it through sexuality, be it through religion, be it through any sort of marginalization. So, this need of wanting to connect and wanting to um, be supportive of any sort of, of any person who has been marginalized, came to me because of my own marginalization. I think I could relate to it. So, um, it has been a slow journey of understanding the anti-caste movement and being anti-caste in a way that is possible for me, because I truly believe that it is very hard for a person coming from a certain kind of background, because we all come with our own challenges. um, so in my case, the fact that I crave to be something that historically was part of my caste location can be looked up as problematic by the anti-caste movement itself. Like, while like people would want to break free from what they were um, forced to do, I want to do what my ancestors did. But the problem again is that we were stopped from practicing this art form. So these are certain challenges that I face, but I do believe truly that I am anti-caste, and I do believe that any sort of oppression is should be destroyed, should be avoided. Yeah.
Thanks, Nitya. And tell me about the time when you first expressed your desire to, enter this profession. How did your immediate friends and family sort of reacted? What were their immediate reaction like?
So, like I said, as a young child, I was constantly seeing dance and hearing dance, right? So, my grandfather was a wonderful musician. He sang like a dream. He was one of those, he was the epitome of what Bharatanatyam is, or what a Bharatanatyam teacher was meant to be. So, I was constantly hearing this, but um, and in a way he was encouraging of me. I mean, he would say that I sang well, he would encourage me. I would be dancing in all his shows where his students were dancing on stage, but I would be dancing down. So all of this would happen, but I never had a debut performance, which is called an arangetram. Neither did I neither was I encouraged to really pursue this. So when I was around in my teens, I started feeling this bias. Like, here, my grandfather was teaching so many people. They were having debut performances. They were having performances back to back, and their parents were spending money on this art form to help their wards become better at their art, and it didn't happen to me. So I mean, I had a best friend who learned from my mother, and while she would have new costumes, I mean, we studied in the same school. I would believe that we were from similar class backgrounds, but I never got to have the same kind of exposure that she got through in dance. So I would always feel that my mother treated me differently. So there was a point in time when I used to go complain to my father that maybe if you paid fee to my to Amma, then maybe she would look at me, or maybe she would encourage me. So I started feeling the bias, and I started really feeling low about it, othered right at home. The othering was also there outside. So I studied in a very upper caste school, and the school um, was known for its cultural exploits. So they were very much into the arts, and there I would always be constantly be treated as not good enough. So they would, uh, I mean, usually Brahmin women who were teachers there, who were teachers of dance, would sit in front and whisper and talk about my dancing and complain, and they would ask me things like, "Is this how you do it at home? This isn't right," or this whole constant othering would happen. So while I really had this interest to pursue dance, and like, I wanted to be these girls who were learning from my grandfather. I wanted to be these women who were dancing on stage, who had beautiful costumes. I think that's the basic need, right? For a child who sees something of great beauty wants to be that. So I think when I was a teenager, I kind of said it out aloud that I wanted to be a dancer, and my grandmother told me that we cannot let you knowingly into that well. She said that deep-ended well, that, I mean, in Tamil, she said it to me. She said, "அந்த பாழங்கிணத்துல உன்னை தள்ள முடியாது." She said that means that we can't push you into that deep well. That would, I mean, it means that that's it's a death for sure. So don't even think of it. So that was the reaction that my grandmother gave me, and but I mean, it was quite clear to me that it was just not going to happen. So that was the reaction that I had. But I would say that constantly my friends who were, I mean, I would say classmates and not friends. I think I had trouble making friends right from when I was a child. I think it is because of my caste location, uh, and the fact that I was in spaces that was predominantly filled with Brahmin people, or upper caste people, or caste privileged people. So they never got what I was going through. So I constantly suffered silently until I started speaking out and articulating. I think it has been a survival instinct to speak about these things, to write, to explore, articulating my own thought. So that's how it has been for me.
Thank you, Nitya. And also, while you were speaking, and I think it's important to talk about uh, some part of the language which is problematic. And would you want to take some space and talk about it? Of how, since you were mentioning.
Uh, I definitely want to. I mean, so what I want to clearly say is that mostly, I mean, I belong to a hereditary courtesan caste, a caste where certain women from this caste location, I mean, or this community, I mean, I also believe that this wasn't a caste location before all of them were brought together. I mean, during the reform debate, to, I mean, in fact, I believe the reform ended up in the birthing of a caste, which is today called Isai Velalar. The present name of the caste that I belong to is called Isai Velalar, and it is usually attributed to the uh, uh, Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, the ex Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, and the DMK leader, Mu Karunanidhi, and also to a reformist from this community whose name is called Muvalur Ramamritam. So this caste name was given to the number of people who were brought together um, due to the reform of which was about the criminalization of women who were dancing in courtly and temple setups. As courtesans who had a lifestyle that was outside the patriarchal lifestyle of marriage. So they tended to be courtesans and sometimes partners to men of power. I do believe that that is problematic. It is a caste. I mean, if not caste based, I think it is a problematic occupation that is forced onto people belonging to this guild. So while I believe that this wasn't a caste, I believe that every dancing community, every courtesan community, every word that has been used to refer to them historically, before colonization, during colonization, and during reform debates and post independence, has always been casteist, has always been exclusionary, has always been oppressive, and it is greatly stigma inducing. So there have been very many different kinds of names that have been used on these communities. Like in Andhra, women from these communities were called Bogam, which only means pleasure. While in Tamil Nadu, there are many names um, that predate what we today. I mean, we today use Devadasi, but which is problematic again for me. But the names that are used before, some of them are called Kanika. Um, there are many names, but all of these names, Dasi, all of them are extremely problematic. They have a othering nature where these women have been othered, and a certain kind of stigma has always surrounded these women who have been dancers and musicians and artists. Um, so I feel that in an anti-caste space, and if you believe you are anti-caste, it's best not to use any of these terms because it reinscribes trauma, like especially for young women from these communities who do not wish to associate. So um, I would believe that once the reform happened, and I believe that the reform happened in a problematic manner where the so-called victims, these women, were criminalized and they were stopped from dancing. So the law quite simply mentions that any woman who is dancing, I mean, especially from these communities, is someone who has chosen to be a prostitute. I mean, it simply
Yeah.
assumes that a dance anyone who's a dancer from especially from these communities is a prostitute. So these kind of names and the term Devadasi in particular was introduced during the reform debates. I don't think we used it before that. So any of the inscriptions in Tamil Nadu or in Andhra do not have the term Devadasi on them. So these women had many local terms, which again uh, were problematic, but were casteist, were exclusionary. So, but the term Devadasi itself was introduced during the reform debate, where the debates, when these debates were happening, it is the assumption that all these women are prostitutes. I mean, and they were criminalized. Um, so today we have accepted the reform. We, I mean, we have gone through the suffering of, being disenfranchised, being having had women ancestors who've been, pushed out of dancing and their own professions. I mean, their right to livelihood has been denied to them. Today, the usage of the term on communities like ours, where the practice has been stopped, the whole practice of having women like this has stopped. I think the usage of the term reinscribes trauma, and it also takes us to a sort of, it connects us with a past that many women do not want to connect ourselves with. I mean, we we suffer from great intergenerational trauma because of the usage of these terms. But unfortunately, both uh, discourses under academia for dance history and the Bharathanatyam dance fraternity continue to use this term, especially Brahmin people continue to use this term. They claim scholarship on the subject, and they continue to inscribe trauma. I mean, I really want to ask which young woman would want to use these terms and re-inscribe trauma onto herself. Which young woman from these communities would want to do that? So I think it's very important that great nuance is used when these kind of terms are used. I mean, for historic, for the historic narrative to be clear, we of course need to mention that these terms were used, but especially in the present, I think it's very important not to use them. To add on to this, I also want to say that there are other castes which do not have any connection to the performative traditions of Bharatanatyam or Kuchipudi or Vilasini Natyam or any of these classical, so-called classical dance forms, which have dedicationary practices, and they come from the. I mean, while these courtesan castes are from the Shudra backgrounds, the other castes, the Dalit castes, which have these practices like the Yallama cult, the Jogini cults and Matama cults, which continue to exist. These dedicationary practices continue to exist, and women are oppressed, and they continue to be tormented by their realities today. And the term is used for them also. The term Devadasi is used for them also today. So I think it's very problematic to use this term today, because then there is the conflation of many of these castes. Like if this term is used to represent all kinds of women from different caste locations with different realities, with different lives, and who are at different points in their points of reform also too. So then it gets very problematic. So it gets traumatic, and it causes stigma. So I think these are terms that I would rather not use, and I would prefer to, like, encourage people to perhaps use the term hereditary dancing caste, hereditary dancing community. So these are, I think, better to be used. I prefer the term hereditary. That's what I use myself. I call myself a hereditary dancer. So I prefer that term because I feel it's less problematic. Like in all kinds of these kind of interventions, I think this is some kind of intervention that I bring to this narrative, right? I bring to this discourse as a young woman from the community. And I think if you ask me if I've changed in the last 2 years, I certainly have. I myself have used the term Devadasi in the past. I mean, I'm just learning to tread more carefully in a way that I don't hurt myself, I don't hurt my other sisters from this community, who might want to, at some point in time, reclaim and be part of these discourses, be part of discourses on dance, be part of discourses on the history of Bharatanatyam. I'm really looking forward to having more women from these caste and class locations where they actively speak about their histories, actively speak about their foremothers who were artists. And I think it's important to not have shame when it comes to speaking about your skilled ancestors. Um, this again is something that I want to very clearly say, that it's not about celebrating my caste or my ancestors who belong to the same caste. I want to celebrate the skill of the people who who were my ancestors, right? So that's what I want to say about the terms. And I mean, I think any kind of language, terms are actually tools of power. So I think it's good to be using terms that empower women from these kind of marginalized castes rather than disempowering them. Yeah.
Hmm. Thanks, Ritya. And when you in the recent article that you have written in the Hindu for in at the 90th anniversary of your grandfather Nattuvanar Rajarathnam Pillai, there is two lines that you write, and I quote that there is no doubt in my mind that he was certainly entangled in the patriarchal caste-based power and cultural nationalism that shaped Bharatanatyam in his time, and was also driven by a very practical material need to support a family in the 1950s. So, in a way, I am driven by this doubt. If my grandfather were alive today, he likely wouldn't support my dancing and the political nature of it. That's a very powerful line there. And uh, ha, can you, in this context, can you tell me more of about this doubt that you face and also your relationship with your grandfather?
I think this relationship is pretty much the same for me with all members of my family, and it has been very hard for me. And it is this constant doubt that really bothers me. And you know, I think as a young person, it's also, a natural need for you to please your parents and be a good daughter.
Yeah,
This need to please and this need to be
validation.
accepted. This validation is natural. This need for validation is natural, but it's very hard for me to receive it while I'm doing what I'm doing. My parents would rather would rather prefer that I don't speak about these things. They would rather prefer that I live a normal life where I have a happy marriage. I do not involve myself in activism. I don't involve myself in speaking my mind out. I mean, I also believe that it is hugely traumatic for them that I speak about these things, about a past that they would rather not talk about, right? So it's embarrassing for them that I speak about this. And this has been happening to me, uh, even uh, I would say even with my grandmother. I mean, if you asked me who I loved the most, who was the most close to me in my family, it was my grandmother. It was Swami Malay Rajaratnam's wife, Srimati Nagalakshmi. And she came from this hoary tradition of Nattuvanars. Her grandfather was a celebrated Nattuvanar called Vaithiswaran Koil Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai. Her aunts were one of her aunts were the first few actresses of Tamil cinema. And her other aunt was a phenomenal harikatha performer. Her own father was a mridangam player. I mean, but you can clearly see beyond a certain generation, the women performers are just missing. There are no women performers after that. It really becomes a patrilineal sort of a linkage to artistry. So I constantly, I mean, while I loved her very dearly, and my own knowledge of who my family members are and the history and the oral traditions of my family are from her, I mean, here is a woman who was a homemaker, who got married at the age of 16, who had children by the age of 17, and she was one of those people who was actively dissuaded from keeping. From getting into the arts, and she herself had that personal feeling of not wanting to be artistic, this need to be domestic, this the form of domesticity, the most pure form of domesticity was something that you could see in women in these generations in my caste. Like, they really aspire to be homemakers, mothers, and forms of purity. They saw that was they had a certain kind of aspirational wife behavior that they were forced to take up, because they really didn't want themselves to be cast into these characters of or these morally fallen characters, which their ancestors were called as. So this need to make themselves domesticated was very much a part of their persona, and my grandmother was one such person. And she would I constantly had this conflict of whether to speak up or not to speak up for the longest period of time. Like, there were times when I would be going out to be like, perhaps there's a panel on something that I'm talking on, and then I'm going there, and she would be so worried, because these were all part of the dance fraternity. And I mean, this is some panel that is available for people to see. It's on caste and gender. I mean, caste, gender, um, and privilege in Bharathanatyam, I think it is called, and it must be available on YouTube. It happened in the Sri Krishna Gana Sabha, and this, I mean, I was the only person who belonged to a different caste. Everybody else was Brahmin, and while I was going to this event in the morning, surprisingly, she came out, made. I mean, she would never do this. I mean, I had already been a rebel, and they had already given up on me by this time. But she made a dosa for me. She fed me, and then she said, "Please don't make a scene. Don't fight. Don't be angry. Just speak calmly and come back home." So this was the kind of setup that I was in at home. So it felt very difficult for me to navigate between this and that. So to go out and fight, and go out to even just to express myself, was very difficult, because I wondered constantly. I keep wondering, even today when I write that article, I wonder if it would hurt my family. So I'm constantly exposing the reality of my own familial system, right? Like, it is something that actually upper caste women should be doing, but here I am doing this, exposing my own family, exposing their biases, exposing their self persecution, exposing their caste oppression, exposing their histories. So it's not easy. So this is a constant doubt that I have, and I don't think I will ever not have it, because it's going to be a constant part of my life. And it is traumatic, it is depressing, it is hard to put up with it on an everyday basis. It makes me quite anxious. I think it's just something that I have to deal with.
And Nitya, do you think this relationship will ever sort of repair? And especially that since the time that you have started to receive a lot of external validation and appreciation for your work, uh, and I'm also assuming that you will continue to rise. Uh, so, do you think even after that, this doubt will still remain in you, or do you think that relationship will get better, or do you think that is beyond repair now?
I think it's. I mean, I have clearly demarcated this and that. So I keep a familial relationship. That, I mean, I know my responsibilities. I mean, I try to fulfill my responsibilities as a daughter, as a granddaughter. I mean, I should say that I took care of my grandmother when she was ill. I mean, until her last. So I see my responsibility as that, and I mean, I can't stop loving them, right? Like, I can't stop loving my grandmother, despite her not being able to understand what I'm going through. I think it's never going to be easy. I don't think it will get better, these relationships. But I also believe that deep down in my heart, while I fight for myself, I also fight for my mother. I truly believe that my mother was a super talented uh, dance teacher and a musician, a singer, and uh, at some point in time, I remember she would successfully conduct several arangetrams. Um, she is somebody I look up to. Um, Unfortunately, I don't think she sees my fight as her fight, uh, which is similar to perhaps my grandmother. My grandmother was happy to be in the shadow of my grandfather, in looking out for his success and keeping him, taken care of. So I think it was a little better for my mother because she tried to pursue the arts. I mean, she became a teacher, but I still think that she did not get her due. I mean, like I write in that article, while most of my grandfather's sishyas, so-called sishyas, who call my grandfather Vadyar, uh, which simply means in Tamil teacher, uh, they get the legitimization and the authority over Bharatanatyam because of their connection to my tata or grandfather. I think as the daughter, my mother doesn't get the same kind of recognition or authority over the art form of Bharatanatyam. Neither do I get the same kind of authority or you know my specialization or my talent in Bharatanatyam is not legitimized because of my connection to my grandfather. So I think I it's going to be hard for a lot of women who are who have been perhaps co-opted into the system, to understand that my fight is also for them. But I'm willing to take the brunt of it for now. So I think that perhaps in 2 or 3 generations I can see more women who understand and who will perhaps be more willing to speak up.
Very proud of the work that you're doing, Nitya. There's this one word that you used and a while ago, and I can't help but ask uh, more details about it. You use the word self persecution, which
Mhm,
essentially implies probably a community which is sort of persecuting themselves, if I'm not wrong. Uh,
mhm.
wh-
Right.
this is the first time I've heard this word. And what is your can you tell me what do you mean exactly by it, and what are depths around it, if I may ask?
So I think, we do, as Indians, I think we do give a lot of importance to this whole parentage and whose lineage and parentage and all of those things, right? Like the fact that some of my foremothers were courtesans or probably had relationships outside the purview of marriage, uh, is what what drives this narrative of shame uh, around these communities, right? So essentially we have been harassed and oppressed and shamed about our ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you would know that the quintessential slur is to call a woman a bitch, right? I mean, be it in any language. I mean, a prostitute. So today, the name of the term used to refer to these women was Devar Adiyar, which means uh, slaves of God, or um, servant of God, or servant of courtsmen. So that has now become Tevriya, which is the quintessential slur word in Tamil, perhaps like Randi. So with that kind of a history and that kind of a culture, the culture of shaming uh, you, because of your ancestry being the norm around most cultures, I think a lot of us are forced to persecute ourselves, right? Like, we wonder, I mean, this whole shame around where you come from. Is your ancestry one of suspicion? Is do you come from a shameful background? Do you come from a, I think that kind of a doubt, that kind of a nagging doubt and suspicion, and this natural tendency that women from these castes are usually, uh, you know, surrounded by these kind of narratives of shame. Like, it's very easy to call a woman from these. I mean, it's very hard for us to get married. While today, this caste called Isaiwelalar exists, and it's all caste endogamous marriages that usually take place. I think this whole problematic reference to our historical past uh, often takes place in our personal lives, and it's very hard. I mean, including men. I mean, for this in this case, I would like to take the example of Kalaignar Karunanidhi, who was several times the chief minister of Tamil Nadu, who was a powerful figure, who was a politician, but he was constantly spoken about in a very, very shameful manner about belonging to this caste. So he comes. I mean, this community had people who played the Nadaswaram and the tabal, which was called the Periyamelam, and people who were practitioners of the dancing form of Sadir or Bharathanatyam. So this was called Chinnamelam. So people would say, he isn't he from that caste, or isn't he from this caste? Which, I mean, all kinds of problematic things. So it would only be surprising if you don't have self persecution when you belong to these castes, right? Like, you are constantly spoken about in a misogynistic manner. There is a constant, it is a lot of shame and persecution. That I mean, and then you wonder if it is really so. I mean, I was slut shamed for the longest period of time. These narratives of slut shaming it's a lot in our families, especially because of the historical background. So this fear is also a lot. There's a lot of fear about, what if this girl. I mean, this a lot of the respectability revolves around marriage. So to be a single woman in this community and speak about all those things that I speak about is just, very, very. It's so many times more harder than it is for any other person. So the kind of oppression and the kind of pressure that I feel will be very different. So that's why I speak of self persecution.
Nitya, and you know, moving to now a little bit about the dance form, and we have
Hmm.
sort of covered a very good ground about your journey and your story. Would
Hmm.
now
And the
Yes,
social
yes,
aspect
which is
of
I
it,
think
yeah.
which is very important to set context before you actually step into the territory. So that
Right.
anybody who's also listening, they understand the gravity and the depth of what we're going to talk about. uh,
Right.
Nitya, the first question that I have in my mind is, how has Bharatnatyam changed from the time it was called Sadir? Would you can you like talk a few things around it, and specifically with the idea of how it was brahmanized, and with the whole concept of purity, and later how things changed basically with the whole Savarna gaze.
So, first of all, I would like to clarify that I don't believe in this whole narrative of having pre pre reinvention Sadir and post reinvention Bharatanatyam. Oh, I mean, historically, it has been now proven that the term Bharatanatyam was used as early as the 1850s by women in the hereditary dancing caste.
Hmm.
So It simply means that the reinventionists or the Brahmin revivalists, so-called revivalists, only chose the most Sanskritic term amongst the many terms that was used to describe this dance form, to call this dance form, so that it would suit their requisites, right? Like they wanted something that could be attributed to the Vedas and the Shastras, to have Brahminic origins. So they wanted something like that. That was the term that was best suited. So amongst the many terms that was used to refer to this art form, like Sadir, Dasyatam, and many such terms. Bharatanatyam was one of those terms. So I don't believe in that. I mean, I think it's not right for us to say that Sadar was practiced by hereditary people, and once it went on to Brahmin bodies, it was called Bharatanatyam. I don't think it's as clear as that. So it's not. It cannot be reductionist like that. So I would actively ask the listeners of this podcast also to refrain from using those kind of reductionist theories. So while Sadar is one of the names, and Sadir is a term that was used within the hereditary communities. Bharatanatyam was also used by these by some of these women. So, in fact, there is a woman called Bharatanatyamo Ammalu Ammal. Her name has the prefix Bharatanatyam. She writes a letter, and I think the letter is dated in early 18th. Early 19th century. I'm not sure, but it's quite before the revival period, before the 1920s. So at least 100 years before that. So you can clearly see that the usage of the term was prevalent in these communities. And I also want to say that as much as there has been involvement of the hereditary courtesan caste in the creation and in the practice of Sadir, or the precursor form, or whatever the form that was exclusively performed by these castes, there is so much contribution of the same castes, especially the men, into what is today called Bharatanatyam. So, by clearly distinguishing Sadir and Bharatanatyam as two different forms, we are actually erasing the contribution of the hereditary practitioners into the new form. And it is not easy to say that this is the difference between the old and the new. How was it Brahmanized? I think it was simply given a Brahminic past. It was simply given a Brahminic attribution. It was given an attribution to the Natya Shastra, which is attributed to somebody called the Bharata Muni, which somehow erases the active contribution of the hereditary practitioners and the living bodies of the dancers, of the women dancers, who were practicing this art form, and who were keeping these art forms, whose lifestyles supported this performative tradition. So, if you ask me though, what the difference is, in the present, I would rather speak about it in the present, because I live now and I know. I would say that this need for straight lines and geometry and precision and agility and size zero bodies and a certain kind of lines and the belief that in a ballet-like precision, I would say something that gives it this attribute of being classical and old is actually this need to conform to the Western notions of what ballet look like, or that is the problem, right? So, and in fact, I would say that early reinventionists did not perform the way that people perform today. People simply attribute it to evolution and such things. But what is problematic is that they call it a classical form. A classical form simply means it's ancient, right? It's ancient, it's old. But if it doesn't look like something that was performed 40 years ago, perhaps by your own teachers and the teacher of your teachers, I mean, then how can it be classical? Because you've changed the whole grammar, you've changed how it looks, the aesthetics, everything has changed. So that is the predominant change, I would say, that is visible in Bharatanatyam today. The need for ballet-like precision and this need for lines and clarity and all kinds of of notions of purity. So that's one important thing. And quite contrary to what people say, this whole how the dance of the hereditary practitioners was erotic, and how the reinventionists made it about divinity and about bhakti, and not about shringaram, which is eroticism. I would like to believe that, while that was what was told, in terms of costumes, in terms of glamorous outfits and jewelry and all of that, the reinventionists created. I mean, it was basically the exclusion of certain kind of bodies. It was calling Bahujan bodies as impure, and as morally fallen, or as sexy, as simply sexual, right? Like, this whole idea that only Brahmin bodies can be beautiful without being sexual, or without exhibiting any sort of sexual energy. It comes from a Brahminic mind, right? This notion that if a Brahmin body dances, and it then can only be about bhakti. How can any dance form not be about the physical body? I mean, it's a visual form. It's going to be about the body. It's nobody, I think, can exclude their own sexuality from their own body when they present their body on a stage. So these notions are clearly much more about what these people wanted to claim through words, rather than what it was on the physical body itself, right? It was words, and it was a kind of intellectual, Brahminic intellectual theories that were brought about, which clearly helped upkeeping this tradition and making it into what it is today. It is a certain kind of cultural nationalism, basically, that has made Bharatanatyam into what it is today. But unfortunately, Bharatanatyam today is and I mean, it can only serve a certain agenda, and it is going to be the vehicle of Hindu majoritarianism. It can speak about mythology, it can speak about gods and goddesses, and it can speak about the so-called good over the evil, while constantly indigenous, dark-skinned people are going to be considered as the evil people, and they are going to be destroyed and killed, and their destruction is going to be celebrated on stage. So while historically, when the hereditary practitioners danced this art form, it was less about mythology, and it was more about the emotion of love. It was about Shringara, it was about uh, themes of love, basically. So that is also a predominant change, the introduction of mythological themes into this art form, and making it into a religious Hindu art form.
And Nitya, while you were speaking, I was also, couldn't help but also think uh, that how significant, or how do I put it, what has been amongst the many misconceptions that people have about Bharatnatyam. What do you think are like some of the very very prominent misconceptions do general people have about Bharatnatyam?
I mean, general people think that it's a Brahminic art form, that it has Brahminic origins, that historically only Brahmins were dancing this art form. That's one thing. So the other misconceptions are that only a certain kind of bodies are I mean, only that a certain kind of body is acceptable for dance, right? Like, all these slim, fair Brahminic women are the only ones who are supposed to be dancing. I mean, if you see some of the pictures of hereditary dancers, I mean, I've constantly felt not good enough for dance, because I'm dark skinned. I don't fit into these notions of Brahminic beauty. So I've often looked up to this picture of somebody called Madhurantakam Jagadambal, who is supposed to be from our families, and perhaps 6 generations ago, and she is this dark, not so small woman. So I mean, these are the notions that people generally have, and they also believe that this is the dance of the cosmic the cosmic dance of Nataraja is something that is constantly spoken about in Bharathanatyam. So this is not the dance of Nataraja; it is the dance of the hereditary courtesan. So and the hereditary practitioners of this art form. So it is from them that it comes, and this whole idea of Nataraja and of Shiva and the Thandava and all of that have been actually, something that has been brought about to make this art form Brahminic.
Can you tell a little bit about the criticality of uh, uh, a Nattuvanar in the whole dance form, and how critical and important is their role in shaping the whole Bharatanatyam?
So, pre-reinvention, the Nattuvanar was somebody who taught the hereditary dancer, woman dancer, dancing women, who also conducted their recitals. I mean, there are some videos that you can see. Some of them are from I think from the royal garden of Gujarat, where you see two dancers dancing. And you see a few musicians playing, conducting the whole melam or the dancing troupe, which are all men. So the men are seen holding cymbals. They are seen. Playing instruments while these two women dance in front. So essentially, the dance form was matrifocal, where the women were the focus of the troupe. Often, even the names of the troupe were named after the women who were the performers, who were the star performers. So, during the reform, while these women were criminalized, the men decided to make livelihoods out of teaching upper caste women. So, the moral mandate of the reinvented Bharatanatyam was to transfer this art form into respectable bodies. By respectable bodies, I mean respectable women from respectable classes is the term that is used in these narratives by people like E. Krishna Iyer and Rukmini Devi. So this was a socially engineered program to appropriate. So one needs no doubt when we say this was appropriation, it was planned appropriation. It was a planned socially engineered program where women from the hereditary caste were removed and replaced by women from respectable castes and classes. So while the upper caste women or the oppressor caste women started to learn from the Nattuvanars, they were essentially the ones who could transfer what was left, they could transfer what was important. What was important in the practice of Bharatanatyam, like most of the grammar and many of those things that needed to be transferred onto their bodies were transferred by the Nattuvanars. But like I say, they were definitely at the weak end of the equation of caste and power. They were also left with no choice because they needed to teach these women for a livelihood, to take care of their families. So, in a way, they lost a certain amount of power because a lot of other things, like the aesthetics, um, and what was to be performed, what was acceptable, who was acceptable, all of this was decided by those in power. And those in power were actually the new clients of this art form, while the former clients were actually the patrons. And the patrons, by patrons I mean the courtly, the kings and the courtly men. Now it became the parents of the women who were learning this art form, who dictated these terms. And the Brahminic sabhas that were created, sabhas, or the proscenium stages that were created, that are often held on by Brahminic power structures. And most of these structures are Brahminic. So they are the ones in power. They dictate how one should dance, what is acceptable. So it was a transference of power, I would say. It was not a one-sided transference of power, or or something that can be reductionist, while the men perhaps felt left out before the reinvention because women were getting the focus. The hereditary women were getting the focus. They started teaching, while they started teaching upper caste women, they did end up feeling a certain kind of caste based oppression. But in a lot of cases, they were not able to speak about it. Uh, in many cases, people at home did understand that these were uh, very much a part of their life, where they are undergoing a lot of suffering, but we couldn't speak about they couldn't speak about their caste experiences, right? So this is, I think, the story of the Nattuvanar. He I mean, it was perhaps, in the story of appropriation, the Nattuvanars played the last role of giving away what was left. Um, and they were co-opted into, uh, you know, being the last, perhaps last shards of transference that happened, which then, I mean, there are a few Natwanars who are left, but I believe that, at some point in time, the transference will be complete, and the hereditary caste will be completely cut off. What today is, what is Bharathanatyam? So, that is when the full circle of appropriation will happen. Will
Hmm.
be completed.
Conclude. Yeah. Hmm. And Nitya, what sort of envision? What is your vision of Bharatnatyam, if I may ask?
Uh, So for me, like I said, this is a survival mechanism. I do this to survive my daily life. It's very much a part of speaking out what I feel, what I'm constantly feeling, and it makes me feel better. But I wouldn't say that I stop at that. I do teach a lot of Bahujan students. So a lot of my students are Bahujans, and some of them, even when they are Brahmin, they understand my perspective and where this art form comes from. I think it's very important to teach this art form on my own terms and conditions, where I reclaim my power, and I teach them in a way that I'm comfortable with teaching them, right? So in this way, I am going to teach them about the problematic history. I'm going to teach them about how my suffering continues. And these are things that I'm going to be speaking about while I teach this art form. And I think it's very important for more and more number of young students to understand this. And I think it'll make them better at accepting and acknowledging this history. So for me, it's very important that people who are performers and who are practitioners of these art forms understand the problematic histories, and they acknowledge the problematic histories, like how in uh, in the US and in Canada we have the acknowledgement statements that are read about how the land belongs to indigenous people and indigenous um, uh, communities. I think it's important to at least acknowledge that this was indeed appropriated from a community, uh, whose um, which I mean whose people are still existent, whose people still exist. So I think it's important that that kind of um, acknowledgement is given. I think it's also the first step to reparation and reconciliation for people like me. While that's the case, I also believe that more and more young women from these communities need to be encouraged and asked to be part of this dance form, which they were historically denied access to. And more than that, it's also important for them to reclaim pride in the skill of their ancestors. A lot of these young men and women have ancestors who are celebrated artists, who were skilled artists, who were you know who were acknowledged as being uh, uh, good at their art form, at their art. So I think it's important that they are given that kind of a space to express their pride in having skilled ancestors, and to speak about their histories, to speak about their oral histories, and to actively practice art forms. I mean, this need not be just Bharatanatyam. It can be any art form that has been part of. I mean, I think unfortunately in anti-caste narratives, it's sad that we don't give so much importance to art, and we don't give so much. I mean, it's also because. Um, I think in the Indian context, a lot of these art forms have a caste background, performative traditions, and all of these cultures that are part of certain castes and communities. I mean, there is a certain, especially when it is a courtesan caste, or I mean, this general notion that artists are morally fallen people. I mean, I think it's very much a part of the anti-caste movements that happen, at least in the past, in the south, in Tamil Nadu. So unfortunately, those kind of narratives actively dissuade people from talking about these kind of paths, certain kinds of paths where they have skilled ancestors. And I think it's important to help people from feeling shame and intergenerational trauma that comes from that shame, and to speak of their past with a certain kind of pride, and try to perhaps be part of art forms. At least, if they want to be part of those art forms, then they should be given the space and the opportunity to be able to take up those art. I think I don't believe that you need to restrict yourself to having professions from your caste background. But if you choose to become better at it and become good at what you, I mean, if that's what you want to do, then you shouldn't be denied that opportunity.
Nitya, we are almost done with our my set of questions, and
Hmm.
now I have some questions from the listeners of the show. So if you
Hmm.
don't mind, we'll move towards that section. And
Okay.
so one of the listeners want to understand, and they want to basically want to ask that how do you think we can? This is so this listener and one of our mutual followers, Bao, big fat Bao.
Hmm.
She has this question that, and she wants to know that what is one thing that you would like to tell children who are interested in learning any dance forms? Is there a way to explain the complexity of caste and culture to Savarna kids who are young as 3 or 4 year old?
First of all, I think it's ideal to start teaching any sort of dance form after the age of 6. So it's better that way. And um, one thing is, I don't think it's very easy to explain the history of these art forms in a simple manner to children. But it's, I think, possible to do it over a period of time, because learning these art forms doesn't happen in a year or two. So it happens over a period of time. So while that happens, I mean, I honestly believe that most of these art forms need to be changing their um, uh, ways of discussing these histories, right? Like the history that is given to Bharatanatyam is quite simply this, that they say that a certain set of impure people were dancing it in an impure manner, and then somebody came and then they had to purify it, and then it's purified, and today it's accessible. I mean, it was practiced exclusively by only that set of people, but now it is possible for everybody to practice this art form. Therefore, happy ending. This is the story that is given to everyone. But unfortunately, there is no criticality in trying to understand the histories. Well, I think one thing is to first of all be accepting of people from all caste backgrounds and their cultures and uh, their lifestyles when you come into a dance class. And I think that itself is not possible because classical dance classes are places where um, the greatest degree of Brahminic culture is upheld. One thing that I do is I ask kids about what they had at home, and I normalize eating non-veg. I disclose the fact that I am non-vegetarian. I mean, I remember very clearly that during the time that my grandfather would teach, on Sundays we would make non-veg at home, but it would be such a hush hush affair because classes would be in full swing in the hall, and my grandmother would peep through the door, and we had some sort of a secret language which meant that you added a letter, the letter ka to every syllable of the word that you're speaking. And then she would ask, so should we get chicken or mutton today? And then my grandfather would respond in that same language, and this whole hush hush thing would happen. So I think one thing that I do, I mean, this is something that I do. I speak about whatever food is being taken. I mean, I normalize um, non-vegetarian food. I normalize. I mean, the fact that a lot of my students are Bahujans, and I mean, I make sure the upper caste students understand that it's going to be acceptable for them to have these kind of conversations around. I mean, it's not going to be a place where we are going to celebrate vegetarianism or Brahmanism or any of that. I actively persuade those kind of conversations to happen within the dance class. So I think that is a good way to start, and slowly. I mean, in my case, I think just being open about what's happening in my life, and I mean, whatever I put up on social media is the same thing that I converse with my students. I mean, on an everyday basis. So it doesn't happen when they are very young, but I would say that a lot of kids are very shrewd and they get things. I mean, unfortunately, I think for a lot of people from marginalized caste backgrounds, we have historically hidden our pain and oppression and how we feel about it. We have actively been kept from articulating how we are feeling. So we've been silenced for too long. So it's been very easy for people who learn from uh, us to not feel what we are feeling, not understand what we are feeling or what we are going through. So my only way is to be open. I mean, I in a lot of times I think I also openly discuss and openly speak up when I feel oppressed, even if it is by a student or her parent or anybody from a caste location that is different from mine. If I feel that I'm um, being treated differently because of my caste location, I speak up about it and I question it. So these are things that can be done, but there is no simple way, I should say.
Thank you, Nitya. Thank you so much. I think this was a very, very wonderful, wholesome, enriching conversation. I cannot thank you enough for educating us, enlightening us, and sharing us your experience. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors to come, and I wish you all the success. And thank you so much for being on Lights Camera Zadi. This was so great.
Thank you, Vandit. I mean, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Mostly because it's also the fact that you want to understand and want to make this conversation take place in a way that it's not hurtful to me in any which way. So I like how that has been. So how it has been that way. So thank you for that, and I hope you do more such uh, sessions with more such voices. And yeah.
Thank you, Nitya.